We're going to have a look at the 2017 Barolo vintage. We're going to revisit a vintage that was a little bit overlooked, and it's turned out to be very much better than people gave it credit for at the time. 2017 was regarded as a vintage that gave them all sorts of tricks, but that turned out to be not such big problems. It was very, very hot vintage, very long dry vintage, 4 months without rain. But the resulting wines for most good and particularly experienced producers have turned out to be really, really good. Classic Barolo, nowhere near as big and overripe as people thought. Very balanced and also very fresh. And we had a look at this collection of Sordos at the beginning of the year, and I decided that we would revisit these one more time. They just are so fascinating and ready to go. So Giovanni Sordo is a really interesting producer. One of the producers have been making wine for a very long time. They're different to a lot in that they own 17 pieces of Cru vineyard within Barolo. I think they're the largest landholder of Cru vineyard, and as a result, they actually release 8 of the individual vineyards as individual bottlings, and the wine you call Barolo Normale or Classico. In other words, the blended Barolo that can come from various parts of the Barolo zone. So to taste them, we break them up, sort of progressing across the map from left to right as the wines go from more generous and juicy, I suppose, a little less tannic. Tannin is a relative thing with Nebbiolo. And as you go towards the right-hand side of the map, the wines get more structured, more austere, more reserved. But I guess in some ways even more interesting. But the first set of 3 wines, the Barolo Classico, a blend of 7 different communes, vineyards of 7 different communes, but mostly from the commune La Mora on the left-hand side of the map, that's known for its deep, rich soil. It gives you a deep, rich, relatively soft wine. So it's regarded in some ways as the best way for new people who have to come to grips with tannin, can come to love the complexity and deepness of Barolo, but maybe without the more severe structures and tannins we'll get a little bit later on. So that's a Barolo Classico from 2017, is an absolute triumph. It's ready now, but it will probably continue to go, I would think, for some 20 or 30 years without any problem at all. That will surprise some people, thinking that 2017 is a drink now vintage. But when you say for good vintages in Barolo, drink now, that means you can drink it now because of a general softness. But likely, if it's properly constructed by a producer like Sordo, they'll go for decades. The next wine takes us right up to the top of the Barolo map, nearly into Alba, right at the top of the zone, into the commune called Verduno. And there is one vineyard within Verduno known as Monvigliero that's over the last 10, 15 years has been recognised as a Grand Cru, without a shadow of a doubt. Made famous by the producer Barolo. The very next set of vineyards are the ones owned by Giovanni Sordo in Monvigliero. And they craft a classic Monvigliero, which is in some ways the Barolo that gives you something of everything. It gives you a little bit of the red fruits, but it's mostly darker fruits. It gives you some of the tannins, some of the acid, but in a beautiful, balanced way. It's sort of regarded as the benchmark Barolo in many ways. I should add right now that all of the wines we see now in this 2017 tastings have been made virtually identically. They take the fruit off, give it fermentations and macerations of around about 7 weeks, so quite long by general winemaking standards, and counterintuitive when you think about the fact that it's such a tannic variety, but this is what gets those tannins under control. And after 6 or 7 weeks of time in the big tank, mostly under its skins, with its skins in the juice. The wine's taken off, and then spends the next 2 years in very large oak, the traditional Barolo way. And we're talking 15 to 70, 80 hectolitre large barrels, very large oak barrels, not for any oak character, but to slowly help the wines oxidise. The third wine of this bracket is Ravera. Now, Ravera is from the left hand, it's from the commune of Novello. It's again the most senior vineyard of that commune, and like the wine before it, has over the last 15 or 20 years has become known as a Grand Cru. That's not an official term, but it's really gets that sort of recognition once most of us wine experts or Barolo experts decide that it's been so good for so long, either made by one producer or in the case of Ravera and indeed Monvigliero, there's more than a dozen producers of each. And they've simply proven, because of the qualities, the consistent qualities of the wines, that they really are in the top rank, the Grands Cru. So Ravera is completely different. This is the fascinating thing about moving across the Barolo map, how different they can be. Made identically, so that purely means Nebbiolo is a medium to speak of where it comes from. And this Ravera vineyard, one of the most the highest altitudes of the area, sort of belies is able to belie a hot vintage too, because that altitude gives it a particularly coolness at night, which gives you the full flavour development. The character couldn't be more different to the darker fruits of Monvigliero. Ravera's character is what we call red. It's just red. It's red in an almost a bloody way. Cherry juice. It's sanguine almost, and quite robust tannins. Almost what some people have described as brick dust tannins. Really quite a contrast to the wine before. Again, underlining just how fascinating Barolo can be.